This video will explore one of the most beautiful works in the romantic piano repertoire, Liebestraum No. 3 in A-flat major by Franz Liszt. It's a love song, or more fittingly, a love dream, subtitled Notturno, suggesting music of the night. Liszt creates a dreamlike atmosphere in this iconic piece, demanding both emotional depth and technical precision from the performer. He fuses virtuosity with intimacy, fragility, and intensity, shaping these characteristics into a colorful sound world. Step by step, we'll focus on each section, looking closely at the phrases and layers within them, and discussing the techniques they require. All the while, we'll explore interpretive choices that help bring this music's poetry to life. Before we begin crafting the piece, let's first look at its structure. Liebestraum No. 3 consists of three main sections: the first, middle, and final, all based on the main theme. Liszt connects these sections with two elegant cadenzas. Although the theme remains mostly consistent, the melodic and harmonic changes with each return bring emotional nuance and perhaps reflect the evolving character of love. Let's begin with the first section. We need to design three layers: the melody in the middle, our expressive focus; the bass below, providing harmonic grounding; and the delicate arpeggios above, adding motion and richness to the music. We'll start by focusing on the melody. Since it is shared between both hands, the challenge is making it sing as naturally as it could with one hand. Let's begin shaping it. In the first 4 bars, I use an in and out wrist motion on the notes that land on the beats. This lets me emphasize them without harshness. A stiff, static wrist tends to create an aggressive tone, because the arm acts like a hammer. The in and out motion, instead, brings out a pronounced, yet beautiful tone. The less sound I want, the less deep I go. For the other notes, I keep the wrist neutral or slightly higher, which reduces the weight and allows me to play them lightly, without worrying about inconsistent volume. In bar 5, I switch to a circular wrist motion and finish the phrase with the wrist elevated, making the motif sound more melodic and letting it fade naturally. I apply 2 types of dynamic shaping simultaneously in the first phrase. One focuses on the subtle details within the melodic line, emphasizing the notes on the beats, applying the written crescendo and decrescendo, and shaping a gentle swell at the end. The other shapes the overall dynamic line, with a gradual fade in volume from the first bar to the end of the phrase. In the second phrase, I use the same wrist motions. I still emphasize the notes on the beats in the first portion, apply the crescendo, and shape another gentle swell at the end. This time, though, I start softly and let the melody grow toward bar 10. Finally, just like in the first phrase, I close it very gently. At the start of the third phrase, push the limits of softness and find a color that touches on the shadowed side of this story. Take the A-flat at the start of bar 13 with the right hand, unless you can comfortably reach it with the left while playing the bass note. Even with very soft dynamics, I lightly emphasize the notes on the beats using tiny in and out wrist motions. In the next 2 bars, I gradually build tension in the melody. Then I let the dynamics fade with the long decrescendo. After that, the melody grows more insistent until it culminates in bar 22. Here the left hand echoes the climax from the previous bar. After lingering on the F flat with the left hand, I calm the tension with a touch of hesitance. Let's move on to the next stage. This time, let's include the lower layer under the melody, which I like to imagine as pizzicato-like notes played on a double bass. There are also 4 measures with staccato articulation in the third phrase, so play those notes a little crisper, but still soft. Don't worry about them sounding too short, the sustain pedal will prevent that. The aim here is to produce a sound that contrasts with the other layers. As the composer suggests, refresh the sustain pedal with each bar and hold it for the entire measure, experimenting with partial pedal depth, since pressing it fully can blur the sound too much. That said, in bar 20, 21 and 22, I recommend changing the pedal twice per bar, which fits the harmonic structure better. For bar 23, I like to use delayed pedaling, touching the pedal lightly on each quarter note. Also, at the start of the third phrase, in bars 13 and 14, I like to bring in the una corda pedal for a little extra delicacy. We want to distinguish the character of each phrase. For me, the first phrase whispers tender intimacy, like a gentle confession of love. The second phrase stands out with its eagerness and hope. The third phrase carries melancholy with a bittersweet sense of longing. Let's give it a try. Next comes the upper layer, which I find to be the most challenging. Even though its musical role might seem less significant than the melody or bass, it has the strongest influence on creating atmosphere. Shaping each motif consistently to build a beautiful texture takes real care. To do this well, I recommend practicing the upper layer without the pedal first, doing all the work with your fingers. This step is crucial, because by maximizing the quality of these arpeggio figures, you can truly elevate your playing. Let's start with the first 2 motifs. Once you learn them, you'll know exactly how to play the rest. Different notes, similar shapes. Notice how each motif begins with a pause, because the melody is on the beat. For now, ignore the melody and imagine both motifs beginning with a C instead of a pause. Then play these motifs in a loop, connecting every note carefully with your fingers. Create little waves by starting each one with a bit more sound, then softening gradually. Leave a small gap at the end of each slur to let the texture breathe. Your wrist is your best friend for making these figures sound flowing and beautiful. Dive gently at the start, trace a counterclockwise circle, reset, and repeat. Do this until it feels natural and you feel comfortable. Next, let's keep playing these 2 motifs in a loop exactly as written. While doing that, imagine that first note is still there. Keep the gentle decrescendo and the circular wrist motion to shape them beautifully. First, focus on shaping these 2 motifs consistently. Once you feel secure, practice the entire upper layer alone at a slower tempo, without pedal, aiming for maximum control and precision. Keep in mind when using your first finger, put in extra effort to play softly, because the thumb often produces more sound than the other fingers unintentionally. So, make sure to keep it fully under control. In the third phrase, several motifs are shorter than the rest. Just as they start with a pause, they also end with one, because of the melodic layer. Still, keep their shape consistent by creating a gentle decrescendo using circular wrist motions. Treat these circular wrist motions as a practice tool. When you add the other layers, the movement will naturally be subtler, but the sense of control you built will remain and help you shape the texture beautifully. Now, before we bring all the layers together, here's a checklist. The melody is always the most present layer. The bass is secondary and the upper layer is the most delicate. No matter how the dynamics develop, make sure to preserve this hierarchy. Use the pedal as the composer suggests, but adjust the depth to suit your instrument, acoustics, and most importantly, your taste. For now, I'll take a slightly calmer tempo, but feel free to play even slower to bring out the beauty of each element comfortably. Later in the video, we'll talk more about timing and tempo. Let's give it a try. What follows next looked quite scary when I first saw the score as a child. But today I can tell you there is no need to be afraid, and I'm going to explain exactly what to do to master this cadenza. Here's an essential tip. I strongly recommend playing with consistent fingerings and sticking to them. There are many editions available with fingerings. Explore a few to discover what feels natural for your hand. I've written down my fingerings for the entire piece, and if you'd like to use them, the sheet music in the description of this video. Available for free. The right hand will clearly need more time, given the challenging double notes. Make sure to place your hand further in on the keys, away from the edge, so your thumb can comfortably reach the black keys in any position. We don't want to move the hand back and forth, because that makes it harder to play at faster tempos. Staying more inside helps you play the passage more comfortably and with better flow. Liszt formed 4 motifs, each framed with a slur. Let's shape them not only by connecting the notes with your fingers, but also by phrasing each motif with an imaginary decrescendo. This makes them sound more melodic and creates momentum, helping you play with more ease. Keep your wrist very relaxed, dive lightly at the start of each motif, and let it gradually rise by the end. Now here's how to practice this passage step by step to build control and clarity. First step, aim to play the whole passage with the right hand alone, at a very slow but stable tempo. Play lightly and make sure you press both keys exactly together for each double note. How you start is how it goes. Second step, practice each voice separately to build better control. Start with the upper notes. Use the same fingerings you apply when playing the whole passage, otherwise this exercise has no point. Phrase the motifs under each slur as explained earlier, and keep the tempo stable and slow. Then do the same with the lower notes. Again, stick to the same fingerings and play melodically, steadily, and slowly. Third step, practice with variable articulations. First, play the whole passage slowly with the upper notes legato and the lower notes staccato. When the passage moves upward, it is almost impossible to keep it perfectly legato with fingers alone. But that is fine. Stay on the keys as long as possible to create the illusion of a smooth line. Next, reverse this. Play the upper notes staccato and the lower ones legato. It may feel tricky to press the keys simultaneously, so reduce the tempo if necessary, but do not compromise synchronization. Fourth step, practice rhythm exercises. Start with two classic patterns. First, play the double notes long, short, like dotted 8th notes and 16th notes. Make sure they sound synchronized, your hand stays flexible, and your movements are subtle. When you feel ready, increase the challenge by making the long notes longer and the short ones shorter. For example, double dotted 8th notes against 32nd notes. Then switch to the opposite pattern, short, long, starting with 16th notes and dotted 8th notes, then progressing to 32nd notes against double dotted 8th notes. The goal remains the same, flexibility and precision. Following these 4 steps will greatly help improve this passage. If you want more exercise variety, check out the membership videos on this channel. I offer additional variations there. About the left hand, there isn't much to say. Stick to your preferred fingerings, preserve hand flexibility, and mirror the phrasing of the right hand when shaping the motifs under the slurs. When practicing both hands together, use the same rhythm exercises I suggested for the right hand alone. This will significantly improve synchronization, which is naturally more challenging when both hands play simultaneously. Sometimes students ask why this passage is written with small notes. The short answer is freedom in tempo and expression. Beyond that, it's a stylistic choice. I usually picture passages like this as somewhat separate from the rest of the piece. I aim to play them with a light yet sparkling tone, giving the listener a break from the story and taking them somewhere dreamy. If you like to try this approach, follow the composer's dynamic markings but avoid overdoing them. Slightly bring out the upper voices in the right hand while playing the lower notes more quietly. The left hand should be even softer, allowing the passage to shine. You have complete freedom with tempo and timing. That's one of Cadenza's main features. Still, here are 2 suggestions you can use, adapt, or simply draw inspiration from. One option is to keep the transition seamless, gradually increasing the pace from the arpeggio until the last portion of bar 25. Then, drop the tempo significantly as the decrescendo appears, preparing the listener for the arrival of the middle section. How much you speed up or slow down is up to you. In the second option, the tempo change is minimal to none. After the arpeggio in bar 24, I switch abruptly to a quicker, yet steady pace, and keep that lightness and flow throughout the passage. I stretch the tempo only in the last few notes to show this is the conclusion, and something else is about to come next. Let's move on to the middle section. In the first part, we see a new kind of architecture. The bass stays where it was. The love theme returns, but now is in the top layer. The arpeggio figures shift to the middle layer and split into 2 parallel lines, expanding the color palette. Liszt raises the emotional intensity here, perhaps evoking how love transforms into something more thrilling and a little turbulent. Let's start with the melodic line and the bass first. The initial crescendo and decrescendo show that Liszt wanted something different here. By introducing this dynamic swell earlier, compared to the first appearance of the main theme, he creates a sense of urgency. which I imagine as impatience in the character. This time, let's close the phrase with more presence, allowing the melody to speak more openly. After that, Liszt stretches the line with a long crescendo that carries us to forte for the first time in the piece. Now, let's play the first part of the middle section, isolating only the melody and bass. Let's give priority to the upper line and support it with a gentler bass. The middle layer is now enriched by simultaneous arpeggio textures in both ends. Of course, this richness comes at a price. Now the softest layer is the most crowded. Therefore, we must play it with great care to keep it soft, synchronized, and shape each motif beautifully. Start by learning each hand separately. Apply the same principles as in the first section's arpeggios, circular wrist motions, and shaping them like little waves. Once comfortable, practice both hands together, preserving the gentleness and aiming to shape each motif melodically. Given that the dynamics are building up, we need to grow the middle layer too. Yet, let's do that cautiously, to avoid overpowering the bass and melody later when they join. Before putting all these layers together, let's talk about pedaling. In this section, the texture is denser, the harmony often moves chromatically, and the dynamics are more intense. Because of this, holding the sustain pedal for the entire duration of a bar can blur the harmony too much in certain spots. I suggest changing it with each bass note. Additionally, I changed the pedal twice at bar 31 to let the new phrase start fresh, and twice at bar 36 to make the harmonic shift clearer. Let's try it now, at a calmer tempo. Moving forward, the emotional intensity rises even more. The structure also becomes more varied. Instead of single notes, Liszt now uses octaves in the bass, and either octaves or chords in the melody. He adds different kinds of arpeggios: broken, short, long, single, and dual. Some are played only with the left hand, others with both hands. It no longer feels like small waves, but more like venturing into the open sea. We must clearly voice the melodic layer so it shines through this ocean of sound, regardless of the dynamics, without sounding aggressive. To achieve this, bring out the upper voices while softening the rest. You'll need to experiment with your hand position until you find the sound you like. Two things help. Slightly rotate your hand to the right and keep your fifth finger a little lower so it lands earlier and produces more sound. There is no exact way because every hand is different. You are on your own here. Try, listen, adjust. Keep searching until you find the sound you love. I emphasize the beats, except those at the endings, using in and out wrist motions. As we gradually build the overall volume, let's ensure we shape all the dynamic waves marked by the composer with care. In this last motif, the sustain pedal alone isn't enough to truly connect these octaves. We still need to create the illusion for the ear using both fingers and pedal. First, let's understand it without pedal. Liszt's instruction is clear. Emphasize the first octave with the accent, then land softly on the next, as it closes the first part of the phrase. I listen to how the first accent fades, then play the next octave just as softly. When this approach is combined with pedal, the connection becomes smoother, creating a charming moment despite the wild mood of the music. Let's continue the phrase by playing only the upper voices. Stay in the key as long as possible before moving to the next, to keep the line legato through these two bars. The priority is to play melodically, shaping the phrase with marked dynamics and softening its ending. Then, shape the phrase the same way while playing the full chords. Voice them by bringing out the upper line and keeping the lower voices softer. As before, stay in the keys as long as possible before moving to the next. Moving forward, the dynamics keep rising. Here's a little side note. If you are able to reach an octave with both the fourth and fifth fingers, then use them both to achieve a smoother legato. And please put your best effort into bringing out the upper voices. I phrase the melody by following its natural direction, emphasizing the first beats in bar 50 to 54 with more volume on the accented ones. So I begin the first motif by diving the wrist, then gradually lifting it. Next, I start with the wrist in a higher position, feel the bottom of the keys again, then lift it even more for a softer ending. Once more. Even though the next motif is more crowded, the melody remains essentially the same, so we keep the same wrist motions as before. Next, I shape the melody with a crescendo, then ease the volume as the phrase relaxes. For smoother execution of these octaves, experiment with how much resistance you apply with the wrist. You will probably need less here. Here, each motif contains an accent. Shape them with in and out wrist motions, adding more weight each time you dive in, so the build-up grows naturally and leads to the climax effectively. With all these motions in mind, let's play from bar 50 to 58 with the right hand only. Now let's go back and shape the other layers. From bar 37 to 40, I emphasize the quarter notes in the bass layer. Next to that, I start each arpeggio motif lightly, then gradually grow them, aiming to evoke the sound of waves crashing against the rocks on the shore. Each motif in the left hand has its own growth. This doesn't always match the right hand's phrasing, but it adds movement and excitement to the overall picture. Now let's calmly play these 4 bars with the left hand. In the following 3 bars, let's first isolate the middle layer and lightly stress the notes that align with the bass and melody. Then soften these motifs, except in bar 42, where we still start with a light stress, but shape the motifs with a crescendo and decrescendo. When we include the bass and melody, let's voice the octaves by emphasizing the top voices with the right hand and the bottom voices with the left, for the same purpose as before, to broaden the overall sound palette. In the following 3 bars, the accompaniment is carried solely by the left hand. Here, I like to create bigger waves by shaping each arpeggio according to its direction. This is optional. Even though no accents are written, I lightly emphasize the start of each bar to create a pulse. For example, I do the same in Chopin's Etude Opus 10 No. 12. While shaping the waves with the written dynamics, I also lightly emphasize the bass notes to maintain a sense of time in the left hand. Perhaps more importantly, if I start too softly here, the right hand, which carries one of the most emotionally intense melodies of the piece at this point, can feel unsupported. By emphasizing the start of the arpeggios in the left hand, we strengthen the melody's impact by supporting it with the pulse. Next, we see the same structure as between bars 41 and 43. The same principles apply. Lightly bring out the middle layer notes that align with the melody and bass. As before, make sure to voice the top notes in the right hand and the bottom notes in the left, so you can offer a broader range of colors to the listener. Here's a practical tip that really helps. When practicing the passages in bars 41 to 43 and 47 to 49 slowly, keep your thumbs on the keys a bit longer after playing the octaves, instead of jumping immediately. This helps you make the middle layer sound more legato and gain a sense of security as you move your hands to the next position. When performing these passages at a faster tempo, you won't be able to hold your thumbs as long, but the middle layer will sound more connected, and the confidence you have developed will help you play more accurately. In the final part of the middle section, I emphasize each first beat in the left hand, especially playing the octaves with full weight to produce generous volume. Additionally, I shape large waves with the arpeggio motifs, keep them legato and flowing. The aim is to bring the piece to its biggest culmination in a compelling way and effectively highlight its emotional peak. Here's my take on pedaling in the middle section. From bars 37 to 42, I change the pedal once per bar, which suits the image of big waves crashing on the shore, as I mentioned earlier. In bars 43, 47, 48, and 49, I change the pedal with each beat to keep the chromatic bass lines from blurring the harmony too much. In bar 44, I hold the pedal for the whole measure. In bars 45 and 46, I refresh it twice again, so each right-hand chord blends beautifully with the harmonic flow in the left hand. From bars 50 to 53, I go back to once per bar. In bar 54, I change with each beat again, then hold it until the next motif. For the final bars, I stick to one pedal change per measure. Now let's play the second half of the middle section with both hands at a calmer tempo. Let's quickly break down the next cadenza. First, let's focus on the chromatic passage in bar 59. I like to slightly bring out the upper notes in the right hand, and I do that by approaching them from more distance. At the same time, I stay closer to the keys for the lower notes to keep them lighter. Using small wrist rotations keeps the hand flexible. This is the same approach I use in Chopin's Etude Opus 25 number 11. Upper notes from more distance, lower notes closer, all with gentle wrist rotations. Back to Liszt. The left hand mirrors the right hand. Here I bring out the lower notes and keep the upper ones lighter. So this time I play the lower notes for more distance and stay closer to the keys for the upper notes. For most people, the left hand takes more time to master. So don't get frustrated, just practice patiently. Your right hand must adjust to the left hand's pace. Let the left lead the tempo and match it with your right. If the right hand takes the lead, the left may fall behind, making the passage sound uneven. Here's how to improve this passage right away. Make a routine of rhythmic exercises. Start with a long, short pattern. 3 times with the right hand, 3 times with the left, and 3 times with both hands. Then switch to the opposite pattern. Short, long, same order. Right hand, left hand, both hands. 3 times each. I'll share more exercises for this cadenza in a members only video, so check that out if you're interested. In bar 60, I play the passage with the right hand only, except for the D natural and E flat when moving from the first to the second motive. Using the left hand there helps the right hand stay in position. Here we have 3 types of melodic figures, each requiring a slightly different approach. In the first 4 motifs, I move the wrist in a small half elliptical motion, first to the left, then to the right. And lightly stress the first note of each motif while keeping the line melodic. If you also bring in the left hand, make sure it doesn't stick out. Keep it subtle so the passage sounds seamless. Shape each motif through finger and wrist legato, not just pedal. First, practice them slowly, pausing between motifs. This helps you focus on each motif individually and shape them more clearly. Once you're comfortable, play all motifs in one go. Don't worry about the speed yet. The main goal is to keep them melodic and beautiful. The next figure has 12 pairs of neighboring notes. I give a slight weight to the lower notes to make the passage sound more playful. To do this more comfortably, I use small hand rotations to the left to emphasize them. When practicing slowly, be generous with the range to better understand the motion. As you speed up, reduce the rotation so the passage stays light and smooth. Then comes the last motif. One voice repeats while the other climbs chromatically, searching for its destination. Here, I use subtle wrist rotations to the right. Please keep your hand loose, maintain absolute flexibility, and play more with your wrist than your fingers. This motif is perhaps the most challenging musically, because building anticipation here is essential. The listener must feel curiosity and follow the line to hear where it resolves. To achieve this, I avoid slowing down excessively and simply keep imagining where I want to arrive. The final appearance of the love theme. Now let's put together the entire cadenza. Here's the plan. In terms of dynamics, after reaching the climax at the start of bar 58, I gradually lighten the left hand's arpeggio. Then transition seamlessly into the passage and continue to soften the overall sound until the end. The real challenge with this approach is maintaining that gradual decrease throughout. I also applied the una corda pedal at bar 60, which fits beautifully with this portion of the cadenza. In terms of tempo, after taking a little time at the climax, I gradually increase the pace up to the last motif in bar 60, where I abruptly switch to stretching the tempo to set the stage for the final section. Feel free to experiment with different timing choices. For example, you could still build the pace gradually, but also stretch the time when moving from one motif type to another. Or you could start the cadenza in a stable tempo at bar 59, then slow down gradually from bar 60 toward the end. All that matters is making the listener want to hear what comes next. Let's move to the final section. Here, the love theme carries a sense of departure. To me, this is artistically the most challenging section, because it's the most delicate and softest, which brings the task of managing 4 layers transparently. Let's look at the structure. The melody and bass keep their place, but this time they are accompanied by arpeggio figures in the middle and chords in the top layer. First, let's play the opening phrase, isolating only the melody and bass. I'll build the phrase from bars 61 to 64, with a slight emphasis at bar 63. After softly closing the first part, I'll gently finish it at bar 66. In the next phrase, I build the melody to its highest point at bar 70 with a bit more volume, then gradually fade it by easing the tempo and dynamics, allowing it to fade away softly and disappear by bar 76. Now let's play both phrases with the right hand, only the melody and arpeggio figures. Despite the soft dynamics, ensure the melody stays prominent while shaping the arpeggio motifs very delicately. Now let's play only with the left hand, while keeping the upper layer chords gentle, subtly brighten them by highlighting the top voices. Feel free to break the chords or the wide intervals if you can't reach them. When playing with both hands, what really matters is to bring out the different colors of each layer softly and with affection. Let's put all the layers together. The coda begins with a sense of quiet confusion, like waking up and wondering, was it all just a dream? I like to keep the first motif soft, yet highlight the right hand's upper notes for more shine, then let the motif gradually fade away toward its end. The next motif fades even more, but still with bright top voices. And then comes the moment when you realize, with a smile on your face, that it was just a dream. But an unforgettable one. In the last two bars, I sometimes think Liszt left a hidden message. He uses the same notes as the first two tones of the opening melody. Optionally, you can lightly bring these out and shape them like the beginning of the piece, almost as if he ends the music the way it began, with a final whisper of love. There is one last step: timing. In this chapter, we will focus on the tempo markings and rubato. Poco allegro con affetto, a little lively with affection. This is how the love dream begins. Not too fast, not too slow. Warm, tender, and open-hearted. I like to start the piece with a big stretch in time, then let it flow as the arpeggio figures begin. I aim for a melody that feels present and sincere, but also fresh, like falling in love for the first time. I begin the second phrase more straightforwardly. As the melody grows more eager, I gently push the pace. Then stretch it generously when it turns shy. I start the third phrase very calm and quiet. With Liszt's suggestion of increased dynamics and excitement, I let the music grow generously. After the long decrescendo that follows, I raise the tension again with urgency, arriving at the climax. Here, I like to suddenly stretch the time, intensifying the emotional turmoil. Right at that moment, time seems to pause, and the light takes over. In the middle section, the emotions escalate into a constant surge: excitement, anger, despair, tension, release. Everything feels intense, yet satisfying. It's fair to say that love transforms into a deeper, more complex version of itself. Liszt's markings più animato, con passione, sempre stringendo, sempre più rinforzando, appassionato assai, together with the growing dynamics, signal a long, continuous build-up. This arrives at the huge climax of the piece, where for a brief moment everything dissolves into an ecstatic stillness. Time stops, motion fades, and the music vanishes into an overwhelming sensation. before gently returning to tempo primo, the final section. To me, this last part of the story is as sweet as waking gently from a dream while being softly caressed. Poco e poco ritenuto and smorzando set the tone for the ending. I try to reflect a sense of departure, gradually softening the dynamics and slowing the pace until the final bars. Here, there is no real sense of time anymore, only the quiet confusion of waking up and realizing it was all just a dream. Perhaps not real, yet still true. Before putting the whole piece together, here's my final musical message. While learning this piece, give your best in applying the strategies we explored, technical and musical, throughout your practice. But when it's time to play the whole thing, whether for yourself, someone close, or in performance, let it go. Some details might not come out exactly as planned. Some ideas may shift or even disappear in the moment. Still, there is value in letting the music unfold spontaneously. Liebestraum naturally invites this kind of freedom. So I encourage you and myself to let go a little. Let's hear what love sounds like this time. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like to support the channel. If you'd like to play for me and get feedback, you can book an online lesson through my website. Link in the description. Wishing you joy as you bring this music to life. See you next time.